Hello, readers. Good day to you. And I want to say encore to you. Encore, meaning keep going. Encore is a word that people that attend a concert will yell out to the musicians after they perform a song because they did such a good job and they want to hear more. Encore. Now, why do I say encore to you? Because you have been doing a great job putting yourself in the character's shoes of this book that we're reading. You have been able to almost become Rob, the main character, or any others for that matter, and you have felt what they've felt. And in your own books that you read, your epic books, your independent read books, if one of the characters in your book has become furious or mad about something, you've been able to feel furious too, because you become them. If a character notices that clouds have parted in the sky and the sun comes streaming through, I bet that you have felt that sun streaming through on your face and you feel that warmth of the sun, right? You become the character. You are in the book that you're reading. So encore to you. Now, today, what I want you to really learn, that I'm going to help to teach you, as we read this next chapter, and always when we read, is great readers revise or change the way they think about characters sometimes. We have to. We can't just simply think about a character in one way and then that's the way we think about them for the rest of the book. No, that's impossible because characters change. They change all the time. So we have to be changing what we think about them while they change, as they do. Enjoy this next chapter, chapter 7. It turned out to be an extraordinary day in almost every possible way. It started with finding the tiger, and it ended with Sistine Bailey sitting down next to him on the bus on the way home from school. Her dress was torn and muddied. There was a scrape down her right arm, and her hair stuck out in 100 different directions. She sat down in the empty seat beside him and stared at him with her black eyes. "There isn't any place else to sit," she said to him. "This is the last empty seat." Rob shrugged. "It's not like I want to sit here," she said. "Okay," said Rob. He shrugged his shoulders again. He hoped that she wasn't going to thank him for saving her. "What's your name?" she demanded. "Rob Horton," he told her. "Well, let me tell you something, Rob Horton. You shouldn't run. That's what they want you to do. Run." Rob stared at her with his mouth open. She stared right back. "I hate it here," she said, looking away from him, her voice even deeper than before. "This is a stupid hick town with stupid hick teachers. Nobody in this whole school even knows what the Sistine Chapel is." "I know," said Rob. "I know what the Sistine Chapel is." Immediately, he regretted saying it. It was his policy not to say things, but it was a policy he was having a hard time maintaining around Sistine. "I bet," Sistine sneered at him. "I bet you know." "It's a picture of God making the world," he said. Sistine stared at him hard. She narrowed her small eyes until they almost disappeared. "It's in Italy," said Rob. "The pictures are painted on the ceiling. They're frescoes." It was as if a magician had cast a spell over him. He opened his mouth and the words fell out, one on top of the other, like gold coins. He couldn't stop talking. "I don't got to go to school on account of my legs. I got a notice that says so. Mr. Felmer, he's the principal. He says the parents are worried that what I got is contagious. That means that the other kids could catch it." "I know what contagious means," Sistine said. She looked at his legs, and then she did something truly astounding. She closed her eyes and reached out her left hand and placed it on top of Rob's right leg. "Please let me catch it," she whispered. "You won't," said Rob, surprised at her hand, how small it was and how warm. It made him think, for a minute, of his mother's hand, tiny and soft. He stopped that thought. It ain't contagious, he told her. Please let me catch it, Sistine whispered again, ignoring him, keeping her hand on his leg. Please let me catch it so I won't have to go to school. It ain't a disease, said Rob. It's just me. Shut up, Sistine said. She sat up very straight. Her lips moved. The other kids shouted and screamed and laughed and called to each other. But the two of them sat apart from it all, as if their seat was an island in the sea of sweat and exhaust. Sistine opened her eyes. She took her hand away and rubbed it up and down both of her own legs. You're crazy, Rob told her. Where do you live? Sistine asked, still rubbing her hand over her legs. In the motel, in the Kentucky Star. You live in a motel? She said, looking up at him. It ain't permanent, he told her. It's just until we get back on our feet. Sistine stared at him. I'll bring you your homework, she said. I'll bring it to you at the motel. I don't want my homework, he told her. So? Said Sistine. By then, Norton and Billy Threemonger had spotted them sitting together, and they were moving in. Rob was relieved when the first thump came to the back of his head, because it meant that he wouldn't have to talk to Sistine anymore. It meant that he wouldn't end up saying too much, telling her about important things, like his mother or the tiger. He was glad, almost, that Norton and Billy were there to beat him into silence. Remember, when we think about the characters, we have to realize that they change throughout the books. It's guaranteed to happen. And then when we notice the change, we have to think to ourselves, oops, I guess I'm going to have to think about that character differently now because they've changed. Or oops, I guess I have to change my mental movie that I've been making about this character. Now, the chapter we just read, chapter 7, Rob goes through some changes that I noticed in the chapter. The biggest thing that I noticed was he was really talkative. He talked a lot to Sistine sitting on that bus. The words just kind of fell out of him like gold coins. That's what it said. For example, he talks to her about knowing what the Sistine Chapel is. He talked to her about his legs, how they're not contagious. He talked to her about Mr. Felmer, the principal, and how he thought that the legs were contagious. He was talking with Sistine a lot. And that's different because earlier in the book, up until now, Rob has not talked at all. He's kept silent. Even when those boys beat him up, the Threemongers, Billy and Norton, he keeps silent. He barely even talks to the principal, Mr. Felmer. Right? Rob is a quiet kid, but not with Sistine. Something about her is making him speak up. That's how I do it. I think about how the characters change, and I have to change my mental movie about them. Your job now is to write about the setting of this chapter, the one we just read. Okay? Now, the setting was very unique. In this chapter, most of it took place on the school bus. In fact, it all did. And Rob and Sistine were sitting next to each other on the seat in the bus, and I can picture that. I can picture the seats, the material, the way they smell those seats. I can picture the window beside them. Maybe Sistine is, she reached out her left hand to touch Rob's right leg. So that means she's sitting at the window, and her left hand touches him, and she's sitting beside him, and he's to the left of her. I can see all that. I can picture when the kids start calling out around the bus, they start yelling at them, calling out, drawing attention to them. And I can see how Rob and Sistine they block it all out because they're in this zone together. They're having this really strange, interesting conversation. And everything else doesn't matter to them. because they're so engaged with what they're doing. I can picture Sistine touching his leg and then rubbing her own legs, and how Rob must be thinking, wow, you're crazy. Right? All of that contributes to the setting. It was after school, they're riding home on the bus. You need to describe the setting in as many details as possible right now, okay? Spend a good amount of time doing that, where you can envision and make the movie in your mind about what the bus looked like and smelled like and sounded like and what time of day it was and who was there. That's all the setting. Have fun with that.